Good afternoon, everyone. Uh, Welcome you back to the Boma Show. Lovely to be back again. Away and in the bush and a little sick, so I'm finally back on my Boma Show with you folks. It's always good to have you. Of course, we'll be going through some of our highlight videos from the weekend. Check out what's on the live cameras, and of course, please send in those questions to us on the website. You see the little question box just below your screen. For those of you who aren't registered, please do go ahead and register so you can send us some of those questions. We kicked off today at the beautiful Rosie's. One of my favorite spots, of course. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm, of course, Russell Gerber. Let's see who's with us today, this afternoon. Give us a shout out if you guys are out there. Doesn't seem to be too much happening at Rosie's. Let's head over to Olifants River quick and see who we've got over there. Looks like Suki's back with us. Lovely to have you, Suki. Andre, good to have you. D. Montgolfier, if I'm saying that right. Thank you for joining us. Here we are at Olifants with these lovely waterbuck. Everybody looking pretty relaxed. Still pretty warm up in these parts of the bush at the moment. We're in the autumn now, or the fall, for those of you from the USA. So I think starting to get a little drier, but you'll still have very warm days as we heading into the cooler months. But for now, those temperatures will still be in the 30s, high 30s some days. It's Celsius, of course. We've had a lot of fun things around on the cameras. We'll go through some of our highlight videos for you. As I mentioned to you folks, please send in those questions and comments at any time. And I think we'll kick off today with one of my favorite little animals. This was at Rosie's, a little genet, but we've got a really nice video from it. You always get such wonderful sounds in the night cameras, but if you look carefully on the right-hand side of your picture now, you'll see those bright little eyes. And then you can see our little friend. We used to have one of these at the lodge who was completely wild. He would pop in and got so brave he would even come into the main seating area and would actually attack the little geckos on the walls as we watched him. You can see here, it's not often we get such a good clear video on our night cameras, and this little chap was really cooperating nicely for us. And this is, of course, the common large spotted genet. We get a few different species in southern Africa. We get small spotted genet, of course. There's also the Angolan genet in the northern regions of Namibia. And of course, Angola, the South African or Cape genet. And there distributions don't tend to overlap with these, so it makes it a little easier to identify. You can see this little chap will just be investigating, seeing if he can find any small reptiles, small rodents, insects. They'll even go for fruit if it's readily available. But they are, of course, carnivores. Often mistaken as a cat. They get called a genet cat, but they're actually in their own family, the family of viverids or viveridae. They tend to be pretty common across the northern parts of South Africa, where most of our cameras are, of course. Easily identifiable by those beautiful little rosettes and the big white rings on their tails. And probably the most commonly seen genet when you're out on game drive. And as I said, just a lovely, nice and clear video that I wanted to share with you folks. And we'll go back live now. As I said, that little genet we used to get coming to visit us was so common we actually even gave him a name, which is not normal. We don't tend to name the animals as much as we can. We're back live now. This is the beautiful Tau, of course. You can see things drying up pretty significantly here. Little bachelor herd of impalas in the foreground and those blue wildebeest in the background. The clearly identifiable hardy-dar ibis calling in the background. Suki, you mentioned yesterday at Tembe, one of the elephants was having a great time ripping out the pipes. Tell you what, let's head over to Tembe and see what we've got over there. Yes, Suki, I also saw that. It's pretty common as we get into the drier part of the year. You'll start to see those elephants digging up the pipes. You know where they can get the freshest water. And as many of you know, some of our water holes are, of course, pumped from underground. At the moment, those ellies aren't around. Probably start to come as we get into the warmer part of the afternoon. So far this year, we've seen them arriving around 3 o'clock, almost perfectly for the end of the show every day. But luckily, we've got some great highlights, as I mentioned, from the weekend. We've got some good ones from Tembe too. Got a nice little video of lions that I wanted to show you. Let's see if there's anything hiding in the bushes back there. I know there was some nyala around just before we started. Let's have a look at this little video of the lionesses from Tembe. As I chatted to you guys about last week, we've had quite a bit of lion activity. This I thought was quite fun. As you can see, that one moving around to the back now is actually a young male. A younger female in the foreground. So it's likely these two are part of the same litter. But what I liked about the video is you can see so clearly how the males are significantly bigger. Even though this male hasn't developed his full mane yet, you can see a little bit more of tufty hair around its neck and around the top of its head. And of course, from time to time, male lions don't actually develop a full mane. Most famous of those was, of course, the Tsavo lions, those so-called man-eating lions from the early 1900s up around Tanzania. And interestingly, those two male lions didn't have a mane either. And this one, it could still be coming in. Looking at these two, they look very close. And the only reason I suggest that they're from the same litter is that it's unlikely that that male is ready to start mating. So seeing a female with another male that isn't its brother, that is a sub-adult, is pretty unusual. We have had a few cubs around here at Tembe we watched grow up over the last year or so. As I've mentioned to you folks in the past, keep an eye out on the cameras. The lions and predators are starting to come down to the waterholes late afternoon more and more often. And just a quick shout out to some of you as well. Susie from Montana, welcome. Stephanie, welcome. M. Stonehill, great to have you. And you asking, what is it? That was a large spotted genet, as I mentioned in our last video. These, of course, are lions. And the famous Paul Penzorn from the Africam team has popped us a question. What is the difference between a genet and a civet? We'll come back to that one, Paul, but it's a good question. A lot of people get confused about it. But I really enjoyed this little video of our lions. As I mentioned, an interesting interaction. It'll be interesting to see if those are actually related. Those two. So I'll see if I can find out some more details from the guards at Tembe. Let's cross back live now. This is Cat Eye, a lovely low angle shot of these impala. Another question from D. Montgolfier asking us, we saw a family of those genets on our last trip to South Africa. Do they live in groups or are they mostly solitary? That's another great question. They tend to be on their own most of the time, especially the males. You'll sometimes see the female with their pups. And they can have between 4 and even 6 pups from time to time, usually 2 or 3 though. So seeing a group of 3 or 4 of them together would normally be a mom and their cubs or pups. And sometimes if you see a pair, it may well be a male and a female together. But other than that, yeah, you don't tend to see them in groups so much. So thank you for the question, Miss or Mr. Montgolfier. Thank you. Stephanie asked, can a genet fluff out its tail like house cats do? They definitely can. When they're agitated in any way, if there's another individual around, if there's a fight over territory or females, the males can certainly puff themselves up and the tail hairs will stand on end to try and look as intimidating as possible. So yeah, great question. Most of the time though, their tails aren't puffed up. They actually just are generally bushy tails on the genet. I think one of the things that makes them even more strikingly beautiful in my eyes is impala happily just chewing on their cud here. Let's go over to Olifants River. I wanted to see what was around there. We got those waterbuck that were down there. I think that we got a crocodile here. And you can see almost reflection off of its back, sun reflecting off there. So Paul, your question, what's the difference between a civet and a genet? Well, interestingly, they are from the same family, but a totally different genus. They are both viverids, as we mentioned. And they have similar jaw structures and behavior, and also territorial behaviors. But the biggest difference really is simply in their size. African civet is significantly bigger, normally around 1.2 to 1.5 meters long, including the tail. And they can weigh around about 16 kilograms, 15 or 16 kilograms. Whereas genet, much, much smaller, maximum around 2 kilograms. And a total length of about 1 meter. So that's really the biggest difference. Their patterning on their body is quite different as well. Civet looks more like a raccoon, and genet more cat-like, but as I mentioned, they're actually not in the cat family. So I hope that answers your question, Paul. We've got a lovely video here from Olifants that I wanted to show you. Some great bird activity, and not something we get to see very often, but quite a special video nonetheless. Let's see if any of you know what bird this is, and I'll try and explain to you what he's up to. So you see here, this was also taken at Olifants. We've got some beautiful light on this individual. I'll give you guys a few seconds to give me your guesses on what bird this is. It's pretty easily identifiable, one of our more recognizable birds of prey, or raptors. You can hear in the background the grey go-away birds calling out. And these birds that we're watching, or this chap that we're watching here, can be pretty voracious predators when it comes to the chicks of other bird species. They're renowned as nest raiding species. And they've got wonderfully agile legs, and of course you can see these long legs which he's using right now to dig into the sand. Now, when I saw this, I thought it was really quite special. It's quite a unique behavior, and I was trying to figure out what on earth he was up to. The only reason you could think of him working around on the ground like this would be to try and get at some prey. So it wasn't until I watched until the end of the video where you can actually see what he's after. And interestingly, you'll see in just a minute, digging right there on the bank, of course, a very shallow water table, so digging into the sandy bank like that. See, he gets at some nice fresh water that's been filtered through the sand, and that's actually what he's doing. He's actually digging in there to drink fresh water. Elephants do that from time to time. I hadn't seen one of these wonderful birds do that before, and I thought it was really interesting behavior and something that we don't see every day. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. see what your guesses are on that bird of prey. See if you guys have got some good calls. Mr. Montgolfier, we've got Suki, Andre. Yeah, you all got it right. African harrier hawk, used to be gymnogene. Andre, you asked what is he digging for, and as I mentioned, he was actually digging fresh water in the bank there, which is really quite amazing. Again, not something I've seen actually ever in my career, that I've actually seen harrier hawks dig like that for water, but really cool video nonetheless. We're going to stick with our bird theme. I've got a lovely little predator-prey interaction video that I wanted to show you. Shows the untimely end of a young frog at Rosie's. You can see this is, of course, another one of our uniquely African birds, this hamerkop, or hammerhead in English. But let's see, he's got himself a wonderful afternoon snack in the form of this little frog. I'm not sure exactly of the species of the frog itself. It's difficult to tell from this angle, but as you can see, they try and shake the frog around as much as possible. They'll often see them actually beat it into the ground to subdue it. And they'll also do that just to move it in the beak without having to let it go. And as soon as they get it at the right angle, head first, and we'll see in a minute, gone. That's how they do it. And you can actually see the frog kicking around in its throat as he goes down. And if you watch carefully now, Hamerkop actually grabs some water to wash down that delicious frog snack. Now again, it's obviously pretty common to see. These are pretty voracious predators, the Hamerkop, by the water holes. One of the great benefits of the cameras is being able to watch them without disturbing them. Very often on vehicles, we don't get to see that whole behavior. Birds will normally fly off with their prey and disappear into the woods. We're back live now. But again, lovely video. Some of our special bird species that we get on the Africam cameras. Let's head over to KwaMaritan. We're live now at Olifants River. These waterbuck are still just happily feeding in the shrubs by the river. Just before we started the show, there were a few elephants around at KwaMaritan. I think they've moved on now. I'll just pop over there and have a look and see if we've got any action there. Been having a few audio issues at KwaMaritan. As you know, from our First on Point show, we often get some critters that give us some trouble at our various camera locations. We sent out a highlight video to you folks a few days ago of a dormouse. They're certainly one of the more common culprits. Doesn't look like those elephants are around anymore, but actually let's go over to Tembe. I think we've got some All those nyala are back there. Our Ellies at Kwamaritana have made their way, but we've got the gorgeous nyala bull. And off in the background, just to the right, looks like we've got some impala. Although looking at that white tail from this distance, it may well be some nyala females. You can hear a wonderful bird call in the background. Let's see how on the ball you folks are today. I'll give you till the end of the show. Hear that call in the background. I'll just go quiet again. Well, those are not the birds I was talking about. Those are the impala rams shouting at each other. But it does look like those other antelope in the background, of course, are nyala females. Well, if you did hear that call I was talking about, let's see if you guys know your birds. And give me a shout out. It just called out briefly, so if you missed it, don't worry about that. But we've got one more video that I wanted to show you folks before we headed out today. Just hoping for that bird to start calling again. But yeah, another one taken from the night cameras. This was also at Tembe. They've been quite busy the last few nights. As the water starts to dry up, we're seeing more and more activity like this. These look like barbel, one of the many catfish species that we get in our freshwater bodies. And as you can see, when things start to dry up, things start to get more and more shallow. These fish species are far more exposed, but at night they feel a little bit more brave and they'll actually go into really shallow water like this to feed. They are, of course, detritus feeders. It means they will actually feed on various breaking down organic matter. But they'll also go for insects that land on the surface, much like many of our other predatory fish species. The reason I wanted to show you this and to chat about it is that we've had a few questions about it. People watching cameras at night time and seeing all this movement at the surface of the water, and that's what they are. They are actually likely barbel. At the very least, one of our catfish species. So really interesting to see, and as I mentioned, you'll start seeing that more and more as we get into the dry season. What we will also see then is it's likely our big aquatic bird species, and the crocodiles, and perhaps even some of our predators, sometimes leopard and jackals, even genet. They'll start preying on these fish species as the water gets more and more shallow and there's less and less space. You can see a nice little shoal of them all feeding together. So if you see that over the next few nights on your cameras, hopefully now we've shed some light on what they actually are. That's great. Thank you, Max. We'll go back live now, back to Tembe. We got one more question from Stephanie before we head out. How is worker safety ensured when putting in equipment or fixing things? Do the animals generally ignore people and run away? Stephanie, it's a good point. It's something that you always have to be aware of when you're working in the bush. You can get very blasé at times living out in these wonderful places, and you can forget that there are potentially dangerous animals in the area and could be right on your doorstep, from big mammal species and big five animals all the way through to your small, potentially dangerous venomous reptiles like snakes. So in terms of workers' safety, you will always try and do it in pairs where you'll have one colleague looking around and making sure that there are no animals around as you're working on any of the equipment. If there is an animal that starts to approach, you'll normally just move away. But for the most part, the animals don't like to come close to humans. Even your bigger species like elephant, buffalo, lion, they tend to stay away if people are out in the open. And certainly at night, we don't do any work on the cameras if we can avoid it. It's at those times where things can be more dangerous and we don't see things approaching. So we'll try to do all of our maintenance during the day so that there's no mistakes and no accidents like that. So I hope that answers your question, Stephanie. And lastly, that bird that was calling was, of course, a purple-crested turaco. He stopped calling now as soon as I tried to call him out, but one of the more raucous calls, not the most beautiful, but again, pretty easily recognizable. So if you have a look on Google or on your bird app at home, listen to the call of the purple-crested turaco and you'll hear what I'm talking about. I often hear them around Tembe and the Willifants River as well. But from me, folks, that's about it for today. Thank you for joining us, as always. We'll be back again tomorrow for our On Point show. So please do join us then, same time, Central African time, 2:30. I'm actually out in the field at the moment, so I'll be calling in to chat to Mr. Phil Stephanie, and we'll be going through things together and hopefully have a bit of fun. And I hope that you all tune in and send us your questions and join us there tomorrow. As always, it's been a pleasure. Keep those questions coming. Keep sharing the news and letting people know and your friends know about Africam TV. I love having you with us, and it's you guys joining us that make the show worth it. So thanks as always, and I'll see you all again tomorrow, 2:30. Cheers for now.